Forget New Year, New You. This season is about slowing down, locking the doors, and cozying up at home with the one you really want to do nothing with. Your dog. After the holiday chaos, those quiet nights with a blanket, a podcast, and your pup feel like the reset you actually need. Ollie helps make those moments easier with fresh protein-packed meals made from real human-grade ingredients, so your dog can enjoy some quality comfort food too. Choose from 5 recipes and get a personalized plan for your dog's needs. Meals arrive perfectly proportioned with a scoop and storage container, so serving is fast and mess-free. And with Ollie's in-app on-demand health screenings, supporting your dog is easy, ensuring more cuddles for many years to come. Visit ollie.com/truecrime and use code TRUECRIME for 60% off your first box.
This episode is brought to you by Lifeway Kefir, those delicious cultured milk smoothie drinks that you've probably seen in the dairy aisle of your local grocery store. So what makes Lifeway Kefir so great? Well, they're loaded with protein, calcium, and vitamin D. But not only that, each cup of kefir contains 12 live and active probiotic cultures. And in addition to all of that, they're really tasty too. Want a coupon? Visit lifewaykefir.com/courtjunkie for $1 off your next purchase. That's Lifeway, KEFIR.com/courtjunkie. This episode is also sponsored by 74 Seconds. 74 Seconds is a new podcast that tells the story of a traffic stop that ended with the world watching a man die, live on their phones. It's the story of Philando Castile and the officer who is about to go on trial for his death, Geronimo Yanez. NPR News examines this intersection of race, policing, justice, and safety in America. Subscribe to 74 Seconds now on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Hey everyone, this is Jillian, and welcome to episode 24 of the Court Junkie podcast. Today's episode covers something that those of us who drive have likely dealt with at one time or another, just hopefully with a different outcome. I'm talking about road rage. But before we get to today's case, I want to say a quick thank you for listening, subscribing, sharing with your friends, leaving me reviews, and donating. Just as a reminder, you can talk about this case or any others in our Facebook discussion group by going to courtjunkie.com/Facebook. You can also find me on Twitter at courtjunkiepod or on Instagram at courtjunkie. You can also email me at podcast@courtjunkie.com. And now, on to the show. On Saturday, April 9th, 2016, 33-year-old Raquel Smith and her husband, 34-year-old Will Smith, decided to go to the French Quarter Fest in New Orleans and then go have dinner and drinks with some friends. It was a normal night for the popular, well-liked couple. You see, Will was somewhat known in New Orleans. No, he wasn't Will Smith, the actor, but he was a former defensive end for the New Orleans Saints, Louisiana's coveted NFL football team. Born on the 4th of July in Queens, New York, Will was one of 3 children born to Lisa and William H. Smith. He played college football for Ohio State and was a Pro Bowler. He was drafted by the New Orleans Saints in the first round of the 2004 draft, and he played during the Super Bowl in 2009 when the Saints won. He played for the Saints during his entire career until 2014. But even after he stopped playing football, Will and his family remained in New Orleans. He and Raquel had gotten married in June 2008 and had 3 children, 2 of their own and 1 child from Will's previous relationship. New Orleans was a city that Will loved, the city where he and Raquel had raised their children, and the city loved him right back. But on this night, Will and Raquel were enjoying a night out on the town. At 7:44 p.m., Will posted a photo of himself and Raquel on Instagram with a caption that read, having a blast at the French Quarter Fest. After the fest, Will and Raquel met up with another couple friend of theirs, Richard Hernandez and his wife, Rebecca Dooley Hernandez. The four ate dinner at Ruth's Chris, and then they went to Barcadia, a bar, restaurant, and arcade, to meet up with some more friends. After being there for a while, the group then went to a place called Saki Cafe. At about 11:30 p.m., the group decided to caravan over to another bar, a place called Windsor Court. Will, Raquel, Richard, and Rebecca would go in Will's Mercedes SUV. Rebecca's brother, Jonathan Whipple, would go in an Impala, the second car, and Pierre Thomas and another friend would be in a third car, a Lexus. As they were driving down Magazine Street, the vehicle directly in front of Will's Mercedes, an orange Hummer, reportedly slammed on their brakes. Will slammed on his brakes too, but it may not have been in time. Whether or not the Mercedes hit the Hummer will later be contested, but Raquel, Rebecca, and Richard would later testify that no one in their vehicle thought that they had made contact, so they pulled around the Hummer and kept driving. Shortly after, Raquel noticed that the Hummer was closely following behind them. As they got to the intersection of Sophie B. Wright Place and Felicity Street, Rebecca remarked, "He's going to hit us." And then they felt the impact of the Hummer hitting their SUV, and they heard the rear glass window shatter. In turn, they then crashed into their friend's car in front of them. Will and Raquel looked at each other to make sure that the other was okay. And then Will and Richard got out of the car. Raquel could hear the men arguing with the driver and passenger of the Hummer. Will was saying that the men had just hit them, and the Hummer driver was saying that they had been hit first, and that Will had just driven away. Raquel and Rebecca got out of the car. Raquel went over to her husband and tried to get him to walk away. She locked eyes with him and told him to think about their kids, to just leave it alone. Meanwhile, things were getting heated between the passenger of the Hummer and Richard. Richard had taken off his shirt, and there was yelling back and forth. And then, just seconds later, gunshots rang out. Raquel found herself lying on the ground, clutching her legs in pain, and her husband was lying on the ground back by the Mercedes. He wasn't moving. Meanwhile, David Dreeling was driving down the street when he heard the gunshots. He got out of his car and walked over to the scene, recording with his cell phone. Smoke was coming out from the cars, and the driver of the Hummer was leaned over with his hands on the hood of his car. His passenger was nervously pacing around. David approached the two men and told them that he was in the car behind them when everything happened, and he asked who pulled the gun first. The men started telling David what had happened.
All right, so I heard 9 caps. I was right behind you guys. I just want to know who. I know he got shot. He pulled the gun first.
He went for a gun first. Hold on. Look, chill out.
All right,
explain. Look.
Yes, sir.
The two white dudes with him.
They ran off.
They ran up. I grabbed one of them. Big dude came and kept on approaching him aggressively. Them two was about to get in the scrimmage. I grabbed 1 and 2, and I politely, all I did was this and moved them back.
Right.
I'm like, chill.
Yeah, you got out of the car.
Don't rush my partner.
Right.
If him and him get into it,
Gotcha.
don't do that. Y'all 3 against 2.
The passenger of the Hummer says that a big dude had come at his friend, the driver, aggressively, and that 2 other men had rushed over too. He said he put his arm out and demonstrated what he did to push them back. He said there were 3 of those guys and only 2 of them. We now know that he was talking about Will Smith, Richard Hernandez, and Jonathan Whipple.
So then, they like, man, what you touch me for, man? Dude took his shirt off, all that. What you
White
touch
guy.
us? Yeah, tattoos in his
White
face.
guy.
You ain't about this life. You ain't about this life. So look what I did. I said, bro, y'all chill out. He went to the truck to go get his gun.
He said one of the men took his shirt off and was yelling, "You ain't about this life." He said he told them to chill out and that his friend, the driver, a man named Cardell Hayes, went to the Hummer to get his gun.
I politely walked off. The one with the tattoos came and rushed me. I did like that and backed him back. He fell because he was scared to begin with. Then that's when they ran off. And then I didn't even know nobody went for a gun.
He said one of the guys rushed at him, and then they ran off. His voice then trailed off. David doesn't quite understand the story at this point, and he asks if they had anything to do with the shooting, or whether it was just the car crash he's talking about. The man then says that the other drivers hit them first, and then drove off.
So you had nothing to do with that? Or y'all just behind that?
No, we was behind.
Yeah, okay.
They ran into us on Magazine and tried to run away. They ran into the back of us first and tried to run away.
So y'all weren't involved with this. They did that.
I fucking ran in the back of them and said, "Whoa,
you need that shit right there, bro."
That's why I'm looking at
Yeah, it's smart. Because you're really going to be up here in a second.
They're
going to be in a second. No, you know what?
Black guy, bro. This shit crazy, dog.
Just be cool.
David would later say that he was just trying to keep the men talking until police arrived. Another bystander took recorded video, and you can hear the chaotic scene. The police officers trying to find witnesses to what had happened, and Raquel yelling out for help, saying that she's just been shot.
Who saw something happen? I need people who saw things.
I need an ambulance. My leg has been shot.
Raquel was taken to University Medical Center. She had been shot in both legs. While she was laying in the hospital bed, a man came in and introduced himself as a homicide detective. And in that moment, she knew that her husband didn't make it. 28-year-old Cardell Hayes, the driver of the Hummer, was charged with second-degree murder. His bond was set at $1 million. It didn't take long for news of Will Smith's death to make it to the media. When it was first reported, it was said that Will's SUV had been hit from behind, and that after an argument with the driver, Will was shot multiple times in the back, and his wife shot twice in the legs. But as more details started to come out, more supporters for Cardell Hayes started to come out too. It was reported that Will had a loaded gun in his car, which was perfectly legal in New Orleans, but people wondered if that would somehow play into what had happened. And then surveillance video was released that shows Will's Mercedes looking like it did crash into the Hummer during that first incident and then speeding away, the Hummer quickly following. And then Cardell's attorney started making public statements, insinuating that his client had just been defending himself. In one statement, he said, "There were multiple threats that were made by multiple parties not associated with Mr. Hayes. My client, his friend, and bystanders at the scene believed their lives were in jeopardy." The much-anticipated trial started in December 2016. The prosecutors were Laura Rodriguez and Jason Napoli, and the defense attorneys were Jay Daniels and co-counsel John Fuller. The judge presiding over the case was Judge Camille Buras. The courtroom was packed, and not only packed with supporters of Will Smith, that included family, friends, and even fellow well-known Saints football players like Drew Brees and Deuce McAllister. But supporters for Cardell Hayes filled the courtroom too, and not only in the courtroom, but outside of it. Groups of protesters stood outside with signs that read, "Free Cardell Hayes" and "Stop corruption in the justice system." The implication was that because Cardell was black and because Will Smith was a celebrity, justice was automatically on Will's side. Cardell was pleading not guilty to charges of second-degree murder, attempted second-degree murder, and aggravated criminal damage to property. If convicted as charged, Cardell was facing life in prison. In his opening statement, Assistant District Attorney Jason Napoli said that one of the first witnesses he will call to the stand is Will Smith's wife, Raquel Smith, who will tell the jury who Will was to her: a loving father, a loving husband. Napoli said, "That's not how we knew him. We knew Will Smith as number 91 for the Saints. We knew him for defense. The irony of that," he said, "is that on April 9th, he died defenseless." He said Will first watched his wife get shot in the legs, and then the defendant shot him in the side. The defendant then got behind him and pumped 7 bullets into his back. Will Smith died without being armed, he said. He said Will had his whole life ahead of him. He had just gotten his MBA and had a long-standing offer to join the coaching staff of the Saints. He said Will had a concealed carry permit and that on the day of his death, Will and Raquel had gone to the French Quarter Fest. Will had put his gun wedged between the seat and the center console. He said the placement of that gun will be critical in the trial. Will was intoxicated, Napoli said, that they weren't going to dispute that. Raquel wishes with every fiber of her being that we were here for a DUI today, he said. As the group was on their way to Windsor Court, Cardell Hayes was in an orange Hummer, driving in front of Will's car on Magazine Street. The Hummer stopped in front of Will's Mercedes, and Napoli said that Will did everything he could to prevent hitting the Hummer. There may have been a minor bump, so minor that even Cardell Hayes wasn't sure he was hit, Napoli said. Will then pulled around the Hummer and kept driving. He said Will had either barely tapped it or hadn't even touched the Hummer at all. He said that what happened next was 100% intentional. He said Cardell then followed Will's car and intentionally rammed the back of it at about 17 to 20 miles per hour. He said an expert will testify that Cardell's Hummer was going 15 miles per hour more than Will's vehicle when Cardell hit him. Napoli said what happened next is absolutely crucial. He said there were 2 guns in Cardell's Hummer. Cardell had a gun, and so did his friend, who was the passenger that night, Kevin O'Neill. He said although Will had a gun on him that night too, he made a choice to get out of the car unarmed, but that Cardell got out of his car with his fully loaded .45 caliber handgun. He said Will was angry. There was no doubt about it. His car had just been slammed into, with the mother of his children inside. There was an argument, with Will cursing and yelling at Cardell, and Cardell cursing and yelling at him. Will accuses him of hitting them on purpose, but Cardell says that Will hit him first. Raquel got out and pulled Will away from the car, and as she was pulling him away, another argument was breaking out between Cardell's friend Kevin O'Neill and 2 friends of Will's, Richard Hernandez and Jonathan Whipple, who had been in the car in front of them. Richard Hernandez had taken his shirt off in search of a fist fight. Cardell then started firing, Napoli said. He fired 2 shots that hit Raquel, and then another that hit Will in the side, who had run back to his Mercedes. He then continued firing 7 more times into Will's back. As he was shooting, he got so close that a shell casing ended up in Will's car, Napoli said. He said Raquel crawled to the sidewalk, where she heard Cardell yell, "That's what you get for showing off to the fucking white boys." He said Cardell could then be heard saying, "Where's that fucking white boy?" referring to Richard Hernandez. Napoli said an off-duty officer heard the shots and called 911. He then walked over to the scene, and Cardell can be heard in the background of the call, saying that he had a gun, but then saying that Will said he had a gun too. Napoli said, "That's the defense, but there is not a single witness who will corroborate what the defendant claims. It's not even close to self-defense, he said, given that Cardell rammed the back of Will's car and then got out armed. He told the jurors that they would see cell phone video from the scene and that they won't see a gun visible in Will's vehicle because Will never got to it. It was still wedged in between the seat and the center console. He said there's a dispute over whether Will ever mentioned that he had a gun during the argument, but that eyewitnesses will testify that he never did. He said Cardell told the police he called 911 after the first car incident, but that he didn't. He told the jury that the defense will try to say that Raquel was shot by someone else, not Cardell and not Cardell's friend Kevin O'Neill, but that it isn't true. He said all ballistics came from one gun, Cardell's. He said there is no evidence and no witnesses that will put a gun in Will's hand. He said the defense is going to try and claim that Billy Ciravalo, the former New Orleans police captain who was friends with Will and was with him that night, moved Will's gun at the scene. But Napoli said surveillance video would show that Billy wasn't at the scene when the shooting occurred. He said that Cardell's attorney, John Fuller, had no problem dragging Billy's name through the mud and accusing him of tampering with the scene during media interviews prior to trial. He said the most important pieces of evidence in this case were buried with Will Smith, his wounds. This was murder, he said. This was an execution in the streets. The only verdict in this case is guilty as charged. In the defense's opening statements, attorney Jay Daniels said that there is nobody who feels worse about being here than these folks sitting over there. And he pointed to the defense table, where Cardell was sitting next to his attorney, John Fuller. He said jurors shouldn't be swayed by their emotions in this case, that when they're focused on the facts of the case, they will be led to one conclusion, that Cardell Hayes isn't guilty of what he's charged with. You've got to be willing to accept that what was described as a tap or a bump was enough to throw Cardell into a fit of rage. He outlined for the jury what Cardell was up to the night of the shooting. He ran some errands, went to the barbershop, and went to a party with his friend, Kevin O'Neill. They left the party, with Cardell driving, and came to a stop on Magazine Street while approaching traffic. Will's Mercedes then hit them from behind and then drove away. He said, what the state calls a tap, the law calls a hit and run. He said the state would have you believe that that was enough to send him into a murderous rage, but that someone had hit him and drove off a year prior, and Cardell got the license plate number and reported it, and that was it. There was no shooting then. He said Cardell was once again trying to get the license plate when Will drove away. He was trying to call 911 when Will slowed down quickly and Cardell accidentally hit him. He told the jury that in the surveillance video, before Cardell hits the Mercedes, you can see the brakes flash. He is pressing the brakes, attempting to avoid an accident. There were black box recorders in both vehicles. The one from Will's Mercedes shows that he slowed down from 23 miles per hour to 7 miles per hour, and that Cardell was traveling at 21 miles per hour. He said that everything suggests that in the moment before impact, Cardell was trying to slow down, that he didn't mean to hit Will's Mercedes. If you're intentionally ramming someone, why are you slowing down? He said the people in Will's vehicles were the ones who were being aggressive, and that Will took a couple swings at Cardell. He said one of the passengers in Will's vehicle took his shirt off and was irate, and that Raquel was trying to calm Will down. He told them that Cardell didn't get out of his car waving his gun. He kept it in the pocket on the side of the door and only grabbed it when he saw people approaching him. He said Cardell had his gun by his side when the shirtless man told him, "You ain't gonna do nothing with that gun. You ain't about that life." Will then saw the gun and said, "Oh, you got a gun? I got a gun too. I'll show you what to do with it." According to Daniels, Cardell said, "No, don't do that, don't do that." But Will walked back to his car. He said Cardell didn't shoot until Will had grabbed his weapon. He said Raquel was standing by the driver's side door next to him, and that Will reached into the vehicle, opened the glove box, and began to turn. Daniels concluded that Cardell was in reasonable fear of being killed when he started shooting and killed Will Smith. He said Raquel would later tell police that Will usually kept his gun in the glove box. He told the jury, Will Smith went to his glove box to get his gun. He wasn't going in there for his insurance. Daniels denied that Cardell then stood over Will and gloated. None of that happened. He said instead, Cardell took the clip out of the gun, put the gun on top of his Hummer, and placed his hands on the hood of the car. He said these actions say self-defense. Daniels then attacked the investigation, calling it sloppy. He said the New Orleans Police Department was one step behind the media in every aspect of the investigation, like finding video of the first collision between Will and Cardell. He said the police were never interested in finding the truth. They just wanted to build a case against Cardell. He said police only interviewed witnesses after the indictment came down and the prosecutor had asked them to. He told the jury that they won't get to see some of the video evidence in the case because the police didn't collect it and some was later deleted. He said one witness had video of the confrontation, but that footage was lost when his phone updated. He said, "Really? You have a video showing what happened and you lose it?" Daniels said that Richard Hernandez, the friend of Will's who had taken off his shirt, would be a key element in the case, pointing out that he fled the scene after the shooting while his wife stayed behind. And then, when his wife talked to police, she didn't mention her husband. He said 911 callers would describe Richard as going around and instigating things. He said Richard wasn't interviewed by police until later, when he was at his attorney's office. He said the state won't tell you that he fled the scene. He said Cardell's life was in danger. He acted upon that danger, and unfortunately, a man lost his life. The law allows for that. Prosecutors called Deuce McAllister to the stand first. Deuce was a former running back for the Saints, and he said that he and Will Smith were both team captains while on the Saints and close friends. He called Will a leader, not only on the team, but in the community as well. Napoli showed him a blown-up photograph of him and Will, with Will in his Saints uniform. Deuce broke down in tears, saying that their kids went to school together and that it was tough to not have the guy he usually watched games with and talked to there. He said he was supposed to meet up with Will that night, but that he decided to watch a basketball game with his son instead. He said he learned about Will's death from text messages, phone calls, and from the media. Defense attorney Fuller had numerous objections, challenging the relevance of Deuce's testimony and saying that it could prejudice the jury. The judge overruled and said that the testimony speaks to victim impact. On cross-examination, Fuller asked him if he was brought to give facts in the case or to prejudice the jury. He said, "They didn't call you because you're a famous Saints player, right?" And Deuce said, "No, sir." Fuller said that the only photo shown to the jury during Deuce's testimony was a football photo of them in their uniforms. And in response, the prosecutor held up a photo of Deuce, acting as a pallbearer at Will Smith's funeral. New Orleans homicide detective Robert Bechelder said the back of Will's Mercedes had significant damage to the bumper, the cover of the spare tire, and to the rear door. He said pieces of the Hummer were found under Will's car, which indicated forceful impact. The rear window of the Mercedes had also been shattered. Bechelder said 9 casings were found on the scene, and that all of them came from a .45 caliber gun. They were all found very close to the Mercedes, and one was on the driver's seat, which he said showed that Cardell was in very close proximity. There were none by Cardell's Hummer. They used an ATF search dog, but no more ballistics were found at the scene. A slideshow of photos from the crime scene were shown to the jury, and Bechelder walked the jury through each one. Will's body could be seen, slumped over, in the driver's side of the car. Bechelder said there was no gun found in Will's glove box, nor any ammo. He said there was only papers. There was, however, a gun found between the driver's seat and the center console, but he said there was no evidence to suggest that that gun, or any others, were fired at the scene that night. He said police didn't seize the gun from the Mercedes because the vehicles were getting impounded, and he thought that they would need a search warrant. He said he interviewed 9 people between the night of the shooting, April 9th, and April 15th. On cross-examination, Bachelder said he couldn't recall the names of the 9 people that he had interviewed. Cardell's attorney, John Fuller, kept trying to show that it was a rushed investigation, asking how long until Cardell was indicted, and if he was arrested prior to the gunshot residue test results coming in. Fuller then asked why the glove box was open, and Bachelder said it could have been due to the crash, although the papers had still remained inside. And just as a reminder, what the defense was trying to do here was to bolster their claim that Will's friend, Billy Ciravolo, took a gun out of the glove box prior to the police arriving at the scene. Fuller also brought up the fact that surveillance video was never obtained from the places that Will and his friends had been at prior to the shooting. His claim was that if video had showed Will acting belligerent, it would be relevant to his state of mind. When asked if any airbags had been deployed during the second crash, Bachelder said no airbags went off in either Will's Mercedes or in his friend Jonathan Whipple's car, who had been in front of Will, but that he couldn't be sure about the Hummer. Bachelder also said under cross that he wasn't sure if the bullets that hit Will matched the bullets that hit his wife, Raquel. He said he's not sure tests were done on that. He said he also couldn't say for sure that nothing had been removed from Will's car prior to the police getting there. Prosecutors called Raquel Smith, Will Smith's widow, to the stand. Although a few people involved in this case had spoken out to the media prior to the trial, this would be the first time that anyone would be hearing from Raquel. When introducing herself, she said, "I'm a mother, first of all, and a wife of William Smith." She faced the jury and said, "I don't want sympathy. I want justice for my husband. He is not here today, and I am his voice." She said she and Will have children together, and that Will died the day before one of their children's birthday. She said on the day of the shooting, they went to French Quarter Fest. Will had his gun on him then, and they both have concealed carry permits. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what those are, they're essentially permits that make it legal for you to carry around a concealed handgun. She said that when they got to the fest, there was a security checkpoint, meaning that no guns were allowed. So they walked back to the car so Will could put his gun away. She said he typically keeps it in the glove box when their children are in the car, but since it was just them, she said he put it somewhere on the driver's side. After the fest, they walked to Ruth's Chris, where they had dinner and met up with friends. They then went to Barcadia. They planned on getting home to their kids afterwards, but one of Will's friends, Pierre Thomas, texted, and they ended up going to Saki Cafe. They met up with Pierre and another friend, Billy Ciravolo, at Saki Cafe. About a minute after leaving, the first incident between Will's Mercedes and Cardell's Hummer occurred. Raquel said, "From the bottom of my heart, I didn't think that the cars had actually touched." She said no one in the car thought that they had made contact with the Hummer, so they drove away. And seconds later, they realized that they were being followed. She said Rebecca Dooley Hernandez, her friend who was in the back seat with her, screamed before Cardell's Hummer rammed into them. Will and Richard Hernandez, Will's friend in the front seat and Rebecca's husband, then got out of the car. She said Will was scared. She said she got out too, to follow her husband. She then heard Will and Cardell arguing, going back and forth and cursing. She said she was nervous and crying. She said she then saw another man, one of Cardell's friends, coming over to them. She said she tried to calm Will down, thinking that these guys were bigger than him. She told the men that they have kids and that they'll take care of this, but that no one was listening to her. She said she looked Will in the eye and brought up their kids and said, "Think about the children. This isn't worth it." And she said he then started walking away with her. She said Richard Hernandez took off his shirt and was jumping up and down. When pressed on that, she said that Richard is so small and discounted that he was threatening, saying he was just jumping around. Prosecutor Laura Rodriguez asked if there was any physical contact between anyone in the two groups prior to the shooting, and Raquel said absolutely not. She said she and Will were walking back to their car when she heard a pop, pop. She said she felt burning all throughout her body and that she grabbed at her legs. She said she didn't know that she had been shot, but she collapsed. She played dead because she didn't know if he was going to come back and shoot her, so she just laid there. Raquel started to get emotional as she recalled that night. She said she heard more shooting and then heard someone say, "You want to show off for the fucking white boy? Look at you now." She described the voice as loud, angry, and evil. She said she prayed for her kids, and a lady walking by started praying with her. She said she thought that there was no way her husband didn't make it because he's my Superman. My worst nightmare happened for no reason. She then looked directly at Cardell at the defense table and said, "I didn't do anything for you to shoot me. Thank God I'm here with my babies." She said she had to get a metal rod placed in her right leg. She got up to show the jurors her leg, saying that there are still bullet fragments that are too dangerous to remove. She said she was in fear for her life afterwards, not knowing who attacked them. The defense attorney Fuller objected and said, "For the record, Cardell Hayes has been in jail since shortly after the shooting." Raquel said she eventually moved out of Louisiana, but that Will had always loved it there. He was never worried about safety, but she was. Their kids missed their city, their old home, and their dad, she said. One of Cardell's supporters said out loud, "Jesus Christ," just then, and Judge Burris threatened to have whoever said that removed. But Raquel continued with her testimony, breaking down as she recalled telling their children about Will's death. God needed Daddy more, she told them. When asked to point out the man who had shot her and her husband, she pointed at Cardell and said, "He's sitting right there." On cross-examination, Attorney Fuller started with, "Obviously, we all wish we weren't in the situation we're in today. We sympathize with you." He then asked if Raquel would exaggerate or leave out statements in order to preserve the memory of her husband, to which Raquel replied, no. When asked about Will's alcohol consumption on the night of the shooting, she said he drank one daiquiri at the fest, a glass of wine at Ruth's Chris, and then she couldn't recall how many drinks at Barcadia. Regarding the second crash, she said Cardell did not run up to them when they got out of the car. Instead, she said they got out, and that Will may have gone closer to the Hummer to check out the damage. When asked if Will was being aggressive, she said, "You'll have to define aggressive. I think both of the guys were upset." She said she had tried to get in between the two of them to calm down her husband. She said she did not see who shot her. Fuller asked if Will had a temper, and Raquel replied, saying that everyone gets upset. She then said, "Do you have a temper?" Fuller responded and said, "Let me tell you something. I ask the questions." Rebecca Dooley Hernandez took the stand next. She was the friend of the Smiths who had been in the back seat with Raquel and Will's Mercedes that night. She said she and her husband, Richard Hernandez, met up with the Smiths the night of the shooting. She said Will had one drink at Ruth's Chris and then one drink at Barcadia. She described the first incident, saying that she saw the Hummer in front of them brake fast and then felt Will, who was driving, slam on the brakes. She said she didn't think that they had hit the Hummer, but there was confusion. They went around the Hummer and kept driving, and she said she looked out the back window and saw the orange Hummer then following them. She recalled saying, "He's following us. Seems like he's going to hit us." And then she said that right after she said that, they were hit, and she heard glass shatter. She remembers hearing Will and Cardell arguing over who hit whom. She said she and Raquel got out of the car when they heard the arguing. She said Raquel was trying to break up the argument, and Rebecca went to look for her husband. She saw him by Cardell's friend, Kevin O'Neill, who had been a passenger in the Hummer. She said she saw Kevin swing at her husband and miss. It all happened so fast, she said. She then pushed her husband to get him out of the way, and she said then things seemed to have calmed down. She told Will to call the police, and she never heard anyone mention getting a gun. She saw Will walking towards the Mercedes, and she saw Cardell walk towards him with his gun pointed at him. She heard gunshots and saw Will's body jolt. After the gunfire stopped, Will wasn't moving. She heard Cardell say, "Look at you now, you were showing off." She said she didn't see any remorse from him. She then heard him say, "Where's that white boy at?" And she thought that he was talking about her husband. So she and her husband started to run, and she said that she tried to call 911 when she heard Raquel screaming that she had been shot and asking for help. So she ran over to her and stayed with her, even though she didn't know if it was safe. She went into help mode. She then went to the homicide division to give her statement, which she said made her very emotional. She said she never saw Will reach into the Mercedes, that he was just facing the vehicle, but wasn't inside of it. On cross-examination, defense attorney Daniels pointed out that in Rebecca's statement, she never mentioned her husband, who had left the scene before police arrived. He also pointed out that she never told police that she had seen the Hummer following them. "I don't remember what I told the detectives," she said. He then said how she never told police that her husband had taken off his shirt. The state then called Richard Hernandez, Rebecca's husband, to the stand. Richard reiterated how he and his wife were out with the Smiths and some other friends, and how he saw the orange Hummer slam on its brakes. He said it felt like the Hummer brake-checked them, but he, too, did not believe that their car had made any contact with the Hummer. Describing the second impact, when the Hummer hit the Mercedes, he said, "It was a hard hit. You couldn't believe how hard it was." He said it felt like it was done on purpose. He said they got out and Will and Cardell started yelling at each other, accusing the other of hitting them. He said he started arguing with Kevin O'Neill, Cardell's passenger, who was much taller than him. He said he took off his shirt, expecting there to be a fist fight. He claimed Kevin swung at him, but missed. He said he swung so hard that he lost his balance. He said he never took a swing at him. After the shots rang out, he said his wife ran over to him and told him to stay away, saying that they have kids too. He said he heard Cardell say, "Where's the white boy?" He said he thought he was next and that he was scared, so he got into a taxi and left the scene. He said he spoke with detectives shortly after and told them that he had been in the car. Defense attorney Fuller asked Richard on cross-examination how many drinks Will had had that night, and Richard said he couldn't be sure. Fuller said, "After you took off your shirt, did you say, 'I will fucking kill you'?" Richard said no. "Would you describe yourself as aggressive that night?" Fuller asked him. "No," Richard responded, prompting Fuller to then say, "Of course not." Fuller then told Richard that his wife Rebecca had told police in her initial statement that Kevin O'Neill had been trying to calm things down, but that Richard is saying that he wasn't, so which version was the truth? Things then got pretty intense in the courtroom, with Fuller saying that Cardell had been portrayed as an animal for the last 8 months. He brought up the fact that Richard left his wife at the scene, and Richard agreed, saying that he was scared. Asked if anyone else took their shirts off, Richard said no. On redirect, Napoli said, "What if everyone on scene that evening had taken off their shirt and was looking for a fist fight? Would things have been different?" At one point, the attorneys on both sides began to get into a heated argument, so Judge Burris called for a short recess so everyone could calm down. And then, Pierre Thomas was called to the stand. Pierre was a former running back for the New Orleans Saints, an old teammate of Will's. He had gone out to dinner that night with the former New Orleans police captain, Billy Saravalo. They then met up with Will and their friends. Pierre had been driving ahead of Will's Mercedes the night of the shooting, as the group was making their way to the next spot. He said Will had been drinking that night, but wasn't belligerent. Prosecutors displayed for the jury a photo of Pierre, Will, and Billy while they were at Sake Cafe, just prior to the shooting. Pierre said he was driving with another friend in his car, and they were at a red light when he heard a loud bang. He saw smoke through his side mirror and thought it was an accident. He got out of his car and started walking towards the accident. He described standing parallel to the hood of Cardell's Hummer after he crashed into the back of Will's car. He said he could see Will and Cardell arguing, and also saw Richard and Kevin arguing. He said he couldn't understand what anyone was saying, but never saw any physical contact. He recalled seeing Raquel trying to calm Will down, gesturing with both of her hands as if to say, "Slow down." He said he saw Will and Raquel start to walk back to the Mercedes, so he turned to look at what the other guys were doing. He saw Kevin O'Neill take a swing at Richard and miss, and so he started walking over to try and defuse that situation. He said he then heard a gunshot. He saw Cardell with a gun extended in his left hand, and then he heard another shot. In his peripheral vision, he said that he could see Richard start running. He said after the shooting, he was in shock, telling himself that the guy didn't just kill one of his friends. Pierre started choking up on the stand. He said he then saw Will slumped over the steering wheel. He said he remembered thinking, "How did it get to this point? I thought it was done," thinking that the situation had calmed down before the gunshots rang out. Asked if the shooting was necessary, he said no. Asked if it was murder, he said yes. He said after the shooting, he saw Cardell leaning on the hood of his car. He said he was yelling a lot of profanities. Asked if Billy Saravalo was at the scene during the shooting, Pierre said no. He said he called to tell him about it, as Billy had gone ahead of them and was waiting for them at the next venue. Prosecutors called a man named Steven to the stand, who said he lives right near where the shooting took place. He said he was laying on the couch watching Saturday Night Live when he heard arguing and looked out his window. He saw two large men yelling and a woman who was between them. He said his attention was then drawn to a white guy with no shirt on who was bouncing around and acting ridiculous. He said he couldn't take his eyes off of him. He said he then saw a gun and he told his wife, "There's a gun out." He then heard two shots fired by the larger man, who was determined to be Cardell Hayes. He then saw Cardell move forward and fire about 5 or so more shots into the open door of the Mercedes. A man named Christopher McGaw took the stand next. He was an off-duty police officer who had been at a nearby bar at the time of the shooting. He said he heard the car crash and could hear people arguing. When he walked over to the scene, he said he heard gunshots, 2 at first, and then another flurry of shots. He said he saw a man who was determined to be Kevin O'Neill, standing with a silver gun pointed in the air. He said he walked over to the scene and Cardell told him that Will had told him that he was going to get his gun and, what was I supposed to do? McGaw then called 911. Kevin O'Neill will testify next, right after this quick break from our sponsor. Have you ever considered how your skincare and the products you use affect your health? Well, you might be surprised to know that over half the chemicals you put on your skin are absorbed into your blood. Yikes. So how do you keep taking care of your skin without putting your health at risk? Well, introducing Nudu, a natural skincare line that is safe and has absolutely no toxic chemicals. Its founder, Liana Ashenden, is passionate about helping women find beauty, health, and happiness without having to sacrifice in order to achieve it. So, how did Nudu come to be? Well, Liana was frustrated with the lack of safe, quality products on the market that she could use while pregnant, something a lot of pregnant women run into. So she created Nudu. These products feel luxurious on your skin and actually work to combat signs of aging. I've been using the Natural Beauty System and the eye cream, and I can really feel and see the difference. And for a limited time, Nudu has a 20% special offer just for you court junkies. Order today and use promo code COURT at nudu, nudu.com. And best of all, they have a 60-day, 100% money-back guarantee, so you literally have nothing to lose. That's nudu, nudu.com, promo code COURT. And now, back to the trial. Kevin O'Neill, the passenger in Cardell's Hummer the night of the shooting, took the stand next. He said he and Cardell were at a house party, and they were driving back to a barber shop when Cardell asked if someone had just hit them from the back, and he said he responded yes. He said the Mercedes, the car that had just hit them, then sped off. Prosecutor Rodriguez asked if he had given interviews prior to the trial, to police, to the grand jury, to GQ magazine, to Sports Illustrated, and to ESPN. Kevin said that yes, he did give all of those interviews. When describing the second traffic incident, Kevin said that Cardell smashed on his brakes, but ended up hitting the Mercedes anyway. He said he had been trying to call 911 and take a picture of the license plate when the crash happened. He said that someone got out of the other vehicle and said, "I feel played, I want to fight. We're not about that life." He said this person then took his shirt off and that they were trying to attack him and Cardell. Prosecutor Rodriguez read statements that Kevin had given to the grand jury in which he referred to the men as little people and saying that he had thought that he could handle them. Kevin argued that it still didn't negate the fact that they continually attacked us. He said, "Me having confidence in my ability to defend myself has nothing to do with what happened out there." Rodriguez then read testimony from the grand jury, where he had stated that he feared for his life after he heard the gunshots. She pointed out that he didn't say he feared for his life before the gunshots. Kevin said that their safety was in jeopardy from the very beginning of the situation, and that he only became more fearful after the gunshots. He said that physical contact can still be fatal. After he heard the gunshots, Kevin said he didn't know who it was that had fired, and so he went to the vehicle to get his firearm. Prosecutor Rodriguez jumped on this and said, "The thing you think is reasonable is to go into your vehicle to retrieve a firearm, which is exactly what Will Smith tried to do when he heard shots fired and saw that his wife's knees were blown out." Kevin said that at one point there were about 5 people trying to restrain Will. He said 2 Asian guys, a black guy, and maybe 1 or 2 Caucasian males. Prosecutor Rodriguez said that to the media, Kevin had said that Billy Saravalo was one of those multiple people, but that surveillance video showed that he was actually somewhere else when the shooting took place. Kevin said he thought that someone who was restraining Will resembled Billy, and that he only named him after seeing news reports that he was there. Rodriguez asked where these 5 men went after the shooting, and Kevin said he didn't know. When it was the defense's turn to question Kevin, Attorney Fuller showed a blown-up photo of Cardell and his son and asked Cardell how he felt about Cardell being charged in the case. Kevin responded that he was heartbroken. Fuller asked why he decided to talk to police, and Kevin said because he didn't do anything wrong, and he didn't think that Cardell had done anything wrong either. He then said, "It's a doggone shame that the media has done a better job investigating this case than the police department." The prosecution objected, but Judge Buras allowed it. Kevin said, "As Mr. Hayes sits before me, I know an injustice is being done." At some point during his testimony, prosecutors objected, saying that Kevin was glaring at people in the gallery. Kevin claimed that someone had given him the middle finger. Then questioning continued. Kevin was asked to describe the altercation he got into with the 2 men, Richard Hernandez and Jonathan Whipple. He said one of the men was shirtless, and one of them said something to him about respect. He said Richard took a swing at him once. Fuller ended his cross-examination by asking Kevin that if everything had been the same, but the roles were reversed, would Will Smith be sitting over there? And he gestured towards the defense table. Kevin responded, "I doubt it." Prosecutor Rodriguez got back up on redirect and asked if Cardell had been able to talk to his son on his son's birthday. Kevin said he wasn't sure, and Rodriguez asked him if he thought that Raquel would have wanted her husband to have the opportunity to talk to his son on his birthday. Kevin's response elicited an audible gasp in the courtroom. He said, "Did her husband bring about his own demise?" Kevin then spoke directly to the jury and said that at no point in time did he ever see anyone with a gun. He said, "We are only 2 people in one vehicle, and you have multiple people from 2 separate vehicles converging on us at once, at night, in the dark, after we were already hit." He called it automatic chaos and hostility and said they did nothing to instigate any sort of violence. The next 2 witnesses were friends who were in the area at the time of the shooting. Justin Ross took video that was later deleted. He said he saw a shirtless man being especially aggressive and threatening the other guys. He said he saw Will and Cardell arguing, and a woman in between them, trying to push Will back. He described hearing the gunshots, and he immediately dropped down behind a car. He said he then started recording the scene from his phone. He said he heard Kevin say, "Back down, back off, I have a gun, back down." He said he also heard Cardell say, "I told him not to mess with me. I told him not to do it." Asked by Prosecutor Napoli if he saw Will do anything that was threatening, he said no. On cross-examination, Attorney Daniels asked him if he had heard Richard say, "I'm going to fucking kill you," and he said yes, that Richard was yelling it to both Cardell and Kevin. Justin said he also heard one of the men from the Hummer telling people to call an ambulance and to get this man some help. Justin said he would describe Cardell as being emotional after the shooting. His friend, Abigail Lavray, said she didn't witness the actual shooting because she started to get the sense that something might happen, and so she backed away. She said she heard one of the guys from the Hummer say to back down, or he would do something dangerous, although she couldn't recall hearing the word gun. She said she didn't see any physical contact except between Will and Richard and their wives. On cross-examination, Abigail said to her, it seemed like the 2 guys in the Hummer were trying to calm the guys from the Mercedes down. She said the aggressors were the guys in the Mercedes. But on redirect, Prosecutor Napoli asked her if her opinion on who the aggressors were would change if she knew that one of the men in the Hummer had brought out a gun. She said yes. Meredith Acosta, a firearms expert from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, took the stand and said that there was a .45 caliber pistol, a 9mm gun, and a .357 Magnum revolver recovered from the scene. The projectiles from the scene and from Will's body were from the .45 caliber. Bruce Bruggeman, the lead homicide detective, took the stand. He went over the surveillance video that was played for the jury. You can see Will's Mercedes SUV following behind Cardell's Hummer, heading downtown. In the video, you can see the Hummer quickly stop, and then you can see the Mercedes SUV go around the Hummer and continue driving. It's hard to tell whether there had been an impact or not. If so, it was likely a bump. You can then see the Hummer closely follow the Mercedes, and everything after that took place outside of the surveillance view. However, you can see various witnesses entering the scene. In under 2 minutes from when the crash occurred, you can see people running to where the shots were fired. Bruggeman said that when they searched Will's vehicle, they found a gun in a plastic holder between the console and the driver's seat. The safety was on. He said there were no 911 calls made from either Cardell or Kevin O'Neill, even though they had said that they called. On cross-examination, Attorney Fuller points out that after Cardell was forced to take Mr. Smith's life, he stayed at the scene, and that police never had to issue a wanted person bulletin for him. And he points out that Richard Hernandez, however, had left the scene. He also brought up the fact that Richard had retained an attorney before speaking with police, and Bruggeman agreed that that was true. But Bruggeman said that Rebecca, Richard's wife, did mention her husband during her interview, which is how they tracked him down. Fuller pointed out how Cardell was indicted after just 18 days after the shooting. He started shouting, accusing Bruggeman of getting the surveillance video of Billy Saravallo to protect him, instead of investigating anything that could be important to a self-defense claim. Fuller said the media found the video of Cardell's car possibly being first struck by Will's car before the police did. He gets Bruggeman to say that there were minor rub marks on the back of Cardell's car that could have come from the first collision. He said the right thing to do after an accident is to pull over and exchange information, and that that's what Cardell did in the first incident. Fuller asked him if the right thing is to start a fight after the crash. That would be the wrong thing to do. That's how we end up in a day like today, Bruggeman replied. Bruggeman said that after the second incident, Will and his friends got out and approached Cardell's car, and not the other way around. He conceded that the only people who needed to be restrained were Richard, Will, and another man, not Cardell Hayes. He said that he couldn't say for sure that Richard did not threaten to kill Cardell or O'Neill or insult their race. Fuller then continued to push his claim that the investigation had been rushed, getting Bruggeman to admit that the grand jury had indicted Cardell before Will's toxicology reports had come back. Samantha Huber, the forensic pathologist who performed the autopsy on Will, took the stand. She said no illicit drugs were found in his system. She confirmed that Will was shot 7 times in the back and once on his left side. The organs that were struck were his lung, heart, and spleen, some of them hit more than once. His spinal cord was also hit, which she said would likely have caused immediate paralysis to his lower extremities. Under cross-examination, Huber said Will had a blood alcohol level of 0.235. She said the legal limit to drive was 0.08. A traffic crash reconstruction specialist named Michael Sunseri was then called to the stand. He said that a vehicle's data recorders only kick in and activate when the velocity of the stop is great enough. With the first traffic incident, he said neither car's crash data recorder was activated, but with the second one, he said he concluded that it has all the markings of an intentional crash. Billy Saravallo took the stand next. He's the former New Orleans police captain that was with the Smiths earlier in the night of the shooting. He had gone ahead of them to the next place and was there when the shooting occurred. He said when he got to the scene, he heard Raquel screaming and saw a lot of police lights. He said he saw Will's arm hanging out of the Mercedes. He said at no point did he remove anything from the car. He said that attorney Fuller had accused him in the media of having removed evidence from the Mercedes. He said he worked part-time with the New Orleans Police Department, but was placed on administrative reassignment after he was accused of committing a crime. He said that was due to Fuller's comments. When it was the defense's turn to cross-examine him, Fuller asked if it felt bad to be falsely accused of a crime, as he walked over to Cardell at the defense table. The prosecution then rested, but first, the jury was allowed to examine all of the evidence: the autopsy photos, the diagrams, the 911 calls, and surveillance videos. Under state law, jurors can't take notes, photos, or documents to the jury room, so this would be their last chance to review the materials from the state. When the defense got up to present their case, they called a private investigator that they had hired, named David Olaski. He said he spoke to a lot of witnesses from the shooting and looked at surveillance video. He said he spoke with a witness named Warnisha. He showed her a photo of Billy Saravallo, and she said she saw him reach into the glove box of the Mercedes and take what looked like a gun out of there. She said she had recognized Billy after she saw him on TV and told her family what she had seen. They then encouraged her to reach out to Cardell's attorneys. On cross-examination, Prosecutor Napoli asked him what he thought about the surveillance video that showed that Billy was not there at the time of the shooting. He replied that there were some parts of her story that were true and other things that she had gotten wrong, but he maintained that she still saw a white male take something from the glove box, even if it wasn't Billy. Napoli asked why Olaski didn't record any of his interviews with his witnesses and asked, who's the only person who got out of the car with a gun in their hand? Olaski replied that there are still questions about that. The defense called Madeline Collins, a St. Tammany Sheriff's Office deputy, to the stand. She testified that the prosecution had also subpoenaed her, but never called her to testify. She conducted a gunshot residue test on both of Will's hands. She said he tested positive for gunshot residue. When asked what that meant, she said it meant that he may have come into contact with a discharged firearm, actually discharged a firearm, or may have come into contact with the same particles that comprise gunshot residue. On cross-examination, she noted that gunshot residue could show up on someone who was in close proximity to a gun that had just been fired. The defense called a slew of witnesses who had seen Cardell and Kevin earlier in the night. They all said that Cardell had not been drinking and that he did not appear angry or upset that night. Attorney Jay Daniels then called a police officer to the stand who had taken a hit-and-run report from March 2015 that Cardell Hayes had reported. He said the accident had occurred on March 28th and that Cardell had come in to report it 2 days later. The defense was trying to show here that Cardell had been in a hit-and-run accident before and no shooting had occurred then. But on cross-examination, he said that Cardell had been at a stoplight when he was hit and that he then pursued the car to get the driver's license until he lost sight of it. And then the defense called Cardell Hayes to the stand. Cardell first went over his background and said that he has a 6-year-old son. He said he coached his football team and also coaches 7- and 8-year-olds. He said the night of the shooting, he and his friend Kevin had gone out, although neither he nor Kevin were drinking that night. He said he knew Will Smith as a good football player and that he even tried to incorporate some of his game into his own when he played in his own football leagues. Asked about the hit and run on the night of the shooting, Cardell said he felt his Hummer get hit by the Mercedes, and so he immediately pulled over to the side of the road, expecting that the people in the Mercedes would do the same. He said that when he pulled over, however, the Mercedes veered to the left and sped off, and he thought to himself, why would they hit us and then leave? He told Kevin to try and get the license plate number and said that he was trying to unlock his iPhone to call police when he looked up and saw the brake lights on the Mercedes. He said, I tried to pump my brakes to come to a complete stop, but I accidentally hit him. He said after they hit the Mercedes, a man without a shirt got out and pulled something shiny from his pocket and then wrapped it up in his shirt. He said that when he saw that, he grabbed his gun from the door of the Hummer. He said he kept the gun at his side and got out. One of the guys from the Mercedes said he hit them on purpose. He said he told them, I accidentally hit your truck, but y'all hit me and ran. He said he told them, y'all are fucking drunk and loaded. He said Will threw a cup at him, which hit him, and that Will then swung at him, hitting him more than once. He said the shirtless man also swung at him. He said the shirtless man told Will, he has his gun on him, he's scared, he's not going to do nothing with it. He said he could hear Raquel saying, no, baby, no, stop. Cardell said Will said to him, you got your gun? Well, I'm going to get mine, and I'm going to show you what to do with it. When asked what he thought Will was going to do, he said, I thought he was going to get a gun and show me what to do with it. What else could I think? I think he's about to try to kill me. He said he saw Will go to the Mercedes and saw him tussling with his wife. He said when Will got to the car, he saw him then spin around and he heard a pop. He said he saw a weapon and so he fired his. He said Will had a black gun in his hand. He said he didn't expect his gun to go off as many times as it did, and afterwards, he dropped the gun. When police arrived, Cardell said he told them, I'm the shooter, and then he got on his knees. Cardell said that when his attorney later told him that the man he had shot was Will Smith, he said he cried like a baby. Fuller asked him if Will hadn't posed a threat, would he still be alive? And Cardell said, if he didn't pose that threat, we'd both be with our families right now. His voice shook as he said it. On cross-examination, Prosecutor Napoli asked him if all of the witnesses who had testified that they didn't see any physical contact between him and Will were lying. and Cardell said that he couldn't testify to what other people said. Napoli asked him if Raquel was lying when she said that he had stood over Will's body and said that he was showing off for the white boys. Cardell said he never said that he could tell that Richard was Spanish and that he didn't believe that any of them were white. So she's lying, Napoli said. And Cardell said that a lot of witnesses' statements don't line up and that there's a lot of contradiction in the case. Napoli asked Cardell to demonstrate where Will was when he shot him and pointed out that his version didn't make sense, saying that he shot Will on the left side, so why would Will have made a full turn to shoot Cardell when Cardell was on his right? Cardell said he had turned to the left because he was tussling with his wife. Asked about the .45 shell casing found in Will's vehicle that suggested he was shot at close range, Cardell said he couldn't explain it. Napoli asked him, "Who shot Raquel Smith?" And Cardell said, "I didn't shoot her." Napoli then brought up a jailhouse phone call from earlier that week, where Cardell had asked, "Is the media reporting that I was crying?" referencing the first day of the trial. Cardell said that he didn't actually want the media to see him crying. On redirect, Cardell said the reason for that was because he didn't want any sympathy and that he had been informed not to cry. Fuller then called Cardell's first attorney, Nandy Campbell, to the stand, and he asked her what Cardell's reaction was when she told him that he had killed Will Smith. She said he repeated what she said and then put his head down on a table and started sobbing. The defense then published their evidence for the jury to review: gunshot residue test results, the photo of Cardell and his son, and some other reports. They then rested. The prosecution then recalled Meredith Acosta, the agent with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. She said that in order to fire a round from a .45 caliber gun, someone has to keep pulling the trigger, and she said it takes 5 pounds of pressure to pull the trigger on Cardell's gun. She also said that someone who had fired a gun would likely have more residue on their hands than what Will had on his. In his closing arguments, Prosecutor Napoli said that if they decide to acquit Cardell, it will be anarchy, to send a message that what happened to Will Smith can happen to anyone after a traffic crash. He went over the charges with the jury. If they convict on the aggravated criminal damage to property charge, they must take into account that when Cardell's Hummer rammed into the Mercedes, it was intentional. On the attempted murder charge, he said the state didn't have to prove that Cardell intended to kill Raquel Smith, but that he intended to kill a human being, and in doing so, shot Raquel. On the second-degree murder charge, he said they would have to accept what Raquel has had to, that Will was not Superman, but that he was human. He had 2 lungs and a heart, and he had 7 bullets ripped through them, he said. To convict on manslaughter, he said they must find that there was reasonable provocation for Cardell to do this, to which he said, absolutely not. This was cold-blooded murder. And the last option the jury had was the option of negligent homicide, which Napoli said is comparable to someone cleaning a gun when it fires a shot accidentally and kills someone, something he said is not even close to this case. He then walked through all of the witness testimony and then said that the defense didn't claim that a second gun was fired until the end of the trial. It's been 5 days. All of a sudden, we're hearing about another gun being discharged, he asked. He said that demonstrates that the defense was so desperate that Cardell had no problem looking at you in the eye, looking at Raquel in the eye, and lying about everything. He closed by saying that Will Smith played defense, and it is now your turn to play defense for him. In their closing arguments, Attorney Fuller focused on the fact that Will was a football player for the Saints, a celebrity. He said, would someone even be sitting at this table if the facts were the same, but the roles were reversed? He reiterated that the glove box in the Mercedes was opened, and that Raquel said Will usually kept his gun in there. He then said that bullets from Will's revolver may have been what shot Raquel, and not Cardell. He pointed out that the prosecution says that Raquel was shot twice, and that those 2 shots happened before the succession of gunfire into Will. He said, "The math doesn't even add up," saying that there were 9 casings found at the scene and that Raquel had been shot twice and Will was shot a total of 8 times. He then went through the witnesses and pointed out how Richard was seen as the aggressive one by a lot of them, although Richard himself testified that he was calm. He said the state's burden was to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt and that they can't convict on what probably happened. He then criticized the investigation again, saying that no DNA tests were conducted from under Will's fingernails to see if he had any contact with Cardell prior to being shot, and that the state was so consumed with celebrity that they were blinded in some aspects of the case. He also criticized the state for bringing up Cardell's jailhouse phone calls and for accusing Cardell of him wanting the media to see him cry. He brought up that they had also alluded to another phone call that he had had while in jail, in which the state alleges that he called Raquel phony. Fuller said that Cardell never called Raquel phony, saying, "I beg you to play that call," to the prosecutors. He too went over the charges and said that jurors would have to find Cardell not guilty of murder, manslaughter, or negligent homicide because it was self-defense. As for the aggravated criminal damage to property charge, they would have to find that Cardell crashed into the Mercedes intentionally, which he said wasn't the case. It was an accident, that Cardell was trying to unlock his iPhone to call 911. Regarding the attempted murder charge for Raquel's shooting, he said they didn't know if the bullet had come from Cardell's gun or if she was unintentionally shot by her husband. He said tests were never conducted to know for sure. During the prosecution's closing rebuttal argument, Rodriguez played that phone call that Fuller had been referring to, where they say Cardell had called Raquel a phony. The audio was difficult to hear, but you can hear a woman talking about Raquel having accepted an award on behalf of her husband, and Cardell can be heard saying, "Phony, phony, phony." The jury of 8 women and 4 men deliberated for almost 6 hours before reaching their decision. Cardell Hayes was found guilty of manslaughter for the death of Will Smith and guilty of attempted manslaughter for the shooting of Raquel Smith. This meant that the jury didn't buy Cardell's self-defense claim, but they also didn't buy the murder theory either. Under Louisiana law, you must find someone guilty of manslaughter when the killing is committed in sudden passion or heat of blood, immediately caused by provocation sufficient to deprive an average person of his self-control and cool reflection. But there's something else I found really interesting when researching this case, something that I actually hadn't known before. Louisiana and Oregon are the only 2 states in the United States that do not require a unanimous jury to convict in a criminal court. Instead, only 10 jurors must agree on a verdict. And according to reports, this jury voted 10-2 to convict Cardell of manslaughter and 10-2 again for attempted manslaughter. If that would have happened in any of the other 48 states, the judge could have declared a mistrial. As for the aggravated criminal damage to property charge, the jury unanimously acquitted him, meaning that they didn't believe that he had intentionally rammed into the back of Will's Mercedes. Since Cardell was convicted of manslaughter and attempted manslaughter, he was facing up to 60 years in prison at his sentencing. Cardell's sentencing hearing took place in April 2017, but just prior, the defense filed a motion for a new trial, saying that they had a new witness who would testify that he had heard 2 different types of guns being fired at the time that Will was killed. The defense also argued in their motion that one of the state's witnesses, Deuce McAllister, should have been sequestered, but that he was in the courtroom listening to testimony throughout the trial. And finally, they argued that it was inappropriate to allow fellow football players and coaches to sit in the courtroom gallery in view of the jury. But Judge Beerus denied the request. Cardell Hayes was sentenced to 25 years in prison. And that's all for today's episode. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this case. Do you think Cardell Hayes intentionally shot and killed Will Smith out of anger? Or do you think it was self-defense? Do you agree with the verdict in this case? There's video of the first incident between Will and Cardell, where it appears that Will did bump into Cardell's vehicle, and I'll include the link to that video in the show notes, as well as on my website at courtjunkie.com. To discuss this case and any others, please consider joining our discussion group on Facebook. Just go to courtjunkie.com/Facebook and you can join right from there. You can also follow me on Twitter at courtjunkiepod, on Instagram at courtjunkie, or you can email me at podcast@courtjunkie.com. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.